At 11:30 hours on December 22, 1944, 4 German officers stepped out of the frozen tree line near Bastogne, Belgium, their white flags stark against the snow as they approached the American lines. They carried a formal ultimatum from General Heinrich von Luttwitz, commander of the 47th Panzer Corps, addressed to the American forces surrounded in the key crossroads town. His message was blunt and absolute. The American position was hopeless. 7 German divisions had encircled Bastogne. No reinforcements were expected. Ammunition and supplies were low. If the Americans surrendered, they would be treated honorably. If they refused, German artillery and armor would annihilate them. The ultimatum was delivered to Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting commander of the 101st Airborne Division. McAuliffe had been asleep when his staff woke him to read the German demand. Barely glancing at the paper, he muttered a single word, "Nuts." His staff assumed it was only his first reaction. But when they asked what they should send as the official reply, McAuliffe insisted that "nuts" was the official reply. Lieutenant Colonel Harry Kinnard typed the response exactly as McAuliffe said it. Colonel Joseph Harper carried it back to the German delegation. Confused, one German officer asked what "nuts" meant. Harper clarified bluntly, "It means the same as go to hell." The one-word reply captured something deeper about the American Army, something that had been deliberately built over 2 decades, something that made American forces fight differently than any other army in the Second World War. Where most armies, when surrounded, waited for relief or surrendered when outnumbered, American forces counterattacked, immediately, aggressively, instinctively. This instinct was not accidental. It was the outcome of a transformation that began on September 1, 1939, the day Germany invaded Poland, and the same day General George C. Marshall became Chief of Staff of the United States Army. Roosevelt had passed over dozens of senior generals to appoint Marshall, shocking the military establishment. Marshall inherited a tiny army, just 174,000 soldiers scattered across 130 posts around the world, smaller than the forces of Portugal or Romania. Equipment was outdated. Training focused on ceremonial duties rather than combat. Most officers spent more time filing paperwork than practicing battlefield skills. The U.S. Army resembled a constabulary force, not a modern combat organization. But Marshall had witnessed modern war firsthand. As a staff officer during World War I, he helped plan the Meuse-Argonne offensive, the largest battle ever fought by American forces. He watched American units bleed in costly frontal assaults. He saw how rigid command structures collapsed under the chaos of battle. He understood deeply that the next war would be faster, more mobile, and deadlier, and that American forces needed a radically different doctrine emphasizing flexibility, initiative, and relentless offensive action. The foundation of that doctrine had been laid years earlier when Marshall served as assistant commandant of the infantry school at Fort Benning from 1927 to 1932. During this period, nearly 200 future generals passed through the school, including Omar Bradley, Stilwell, Ridgway, and Bedell Smith. Marshall dismantled the old system of slow, overcomplicated classroom problems and replaced it with dynamic, simple, fast-paced tactical exercises. He believed officers needed to learn how to think, not what to think. They had to make decisions with incomplete information, under tight time limits, in terrain they had not studied beforehand. He pioneered the tactical walk, where an instructor would suddenly declare, "Your unit is here. The enemy is over there. What do you do?" Officers had 5 minutes to evaluate the ground and issue clear verbal orders. There were no perfect solutions, only timely ones. Marshall emphasized that a good decision made immediately was better than a perfect decision made too late. His philosophy centered on aggressive offensive action. If attacked, counterattack immediately. Do not wait. Do not regroup. Do not ask for reinforcements. Hit the enemy while they are disorganized and vulnerable. In the First World War, Marshall had seen countless opportunities lost simply because American units waited too long. By forcing officers to think fast, act decisively, and seize fleeting opportunities, Marshall created a generation of leaders whose instinct was to attack first and figure out the details later. These leaders spread his methods throughout the Army, reshaping training nationwide in the 1930s. When Marshall became Chief of Staff in 1939, he ruthlessly purged hundreds of senior officers who clung to outdated methods, replacing them with younger, more flexible leaders, men like Patton, Eisenhower, and Devers, who shared his belief in speed, initiative, and offensive momentum. At the same time, he launched massive large-scale training maneuvers, the largest in American history. The Louisiana maneuvers of 1940 and 1941 involved nearly 500,000 soldiers maneuvering across thousands of square miles. Entire divisions practiced rapid movement, river crossings, combined arms coordination, and mock battles that stressed quick decisions and aggressive tactics. The maneuvers proved that units that attacked fast and exploited opportunities outperformed units that hesitated or waited for orders. They also exposed weaknesses in logistics, communication, and coordination, problems that could be fixed, but they confirmed the core of Marshall's doctrine: aggressive, decentralized action worked. When the United States entered the war in December 1941, the Army had grown to more than 1 million soldiers trained under Marshall's system. Field Manual 100-5, published that same year, defined offense as the decisive form of combat and instructed units to counterattack immediately when hit. Other Allied armies, British, French, Soviet, emphasized deliberate, methodical operations built on heavy preparation and centralized control. American doctrine was unique. The soldier on the ground, often a lieutenant or sergeant, was expected to act without orders. Training across the Army reinforced this culture. Infantry replacement centers drilled recruits relentlessly in aggressive battle drills. Officer candidates at Fort Benning faced constant pressure to decide quickly with incomplete information. Leaders were promoted for initiative and relieved for timidity. By 1943, this culture of rapid counterattack was deeply ingrained. Its first true test came at Kasserine Pass in North Africa. In February 1943, German forces under Rommel smashed American units, inflicting thousands of casualties. British commanders expected the Americans to retreat, reorganize, and take weeks to recover. Instead, within 24 hours, American artillery was back in action, tank crews were rearmed and moving forward, and infantry regiments were counterattacking. Within 3 days, the American line had stabilized. Within a week, they were advancing. Patton, taking command of 2 corps, told his officers the surest path to recovery after defeat was to attack immediately. The lesson stuck. By the Italian campaign and then Normandy, American forces operated with an instinctive aggressiveness unmatched by any other army on either side. So when the Germans launched their massive Ardennes offensive on December 16, 1944, 250,000 men, 1,000 tanks, complete tactical surprise, it was this doctrine that shaped the American response. Despite breakthroughs, chaos, and collapsing units, small American groups counterattacked everywhere. These actions, often small and sometimes tactically unsuccessful, bought precious hours the Germans could not afford to lose. Meanwhile, Eisenhower and his staff moved whole divisions to counterattack the German thrust rather than form a static defensive line. At a crisis meeting in Verdun on December 19, Eisenhower told his commanders the German attack was not a disaster, but an opportunity. Patton stunned the room by announcing he could turn his entire Third Army north and counterattack within 48 hours. Eisenhower gave him 72. Patton had already quietly prepared plans, nicknamed nickel, dime, and cent, for just such a maneuver. His staff worked through the night. Officers at every level acted immediately, rerouting convoys, moving artillery, disengaging from current battles, and turning entire divisions north. On December 22nd at 0630 hours, only 66 hours after the meeting, Patton's army attacked into the German flank. And at Bastogne, where 15,000 American soldiers held out against 7 German divisions and delivered the famous one-word reply, the defense itself reflected every principal marshal had spent 2 decades building: initiative at the lowest levels, refusal to wait for orders, relentless tactical aggressiveness, and the instinct to counterattack even when surrounded. The Germans believed they had trapped a helpless American force. Instead, they had surrounded a force trained for this exact kind of fight, a force whose doctrine, leadership, and culture made its resistance not only possible, but inevitable. And so the word nuts was far more than a sarcastic refusal. It was the distilled essence of an entire military philosophy, forged in the lessons of the First World War, reshaped at Fort Benning, tested in North Africa, Sicily, Italy, Normandy, and finally proven in the snowy woods of the Ardennes. It was the American Army's character expressed in one perfect, defiant word.